Crveni ruž na tvome vratu nije vredan bola, tera me tera okolo da šetam polugola.
Anyway, I'd have to go back to read exactly how it works, but these people, they do fight, there is pain, and some of them do die. And also, that being said, I don't think we would get rid of natural disasters. There would still be people dying, right? People are dying of old age, maybe, but it's not like all pain or all sadness would be able to be gone.
Okay, yeah, we have that kind of, maybe we will be ready to stop the typhoons and earthquakes, you know.
Robots.
Yeah.
With robots.
Oh, everything. But the point is that are we gonna miss out on something? Are we actually built to have totally that kind of mindset of utopia? Are we actually gonna be happy? That was the question, you know. Is it this? You know, which was. It's a movie, I think, that actually they live in that thing and suddenly happens. Okay, listen, why am I here? Why is it so perfect? You know, something. I think that as a humans, we are maybe not so ready to not so ready, but then one part of our existence is gonna disappear. Like we used to have a tail, now we don't. You know, is that what is gonna happen? Have you ever think about that? You know, is that part gonna, when that part disappears, before or after we have evolution? After we have utopia? You know, that's kind of important because it's gonna be a big change.
So should we bring back smallpox?
No.
I mean, let's say we should eliminate alcoholism with a pill. Should we do that or not? Because there's a lot of creativity that came out of alcoholism.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe James Joyce was an alcoholic. Maybe he would have written Ulysses.
That's actually why we're here. Alcoholics. This is actually an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting.
This is actually an intervention.
For me.
You're out of control. Smallpox will vastly increase the amount of suffering in the world. And imagine how creative it would be.
Yeah, I don't think we need to have like a certain level of pain. I think people will still, no matter what you do, people will still fight.
Yeah, but
They'll still argue.
the pain.
No, they won't.
The pain thing I'm telling you about is you have to realize something, that we are built like this. You may like it or not. You may like it or not like pain. You bring smallpox, AIDS, and stuff like that. Doesn't matter. We are built like it. It's in our stuff, you know. So what is going to happen with that thing? That's something that nobody thinks about. Quite often, you're like, you are built to kill if somebody attacks you. That thing is going to disappear. Well,
I don't understand the thesis here. Is the thesis that humans inherently suffer? Is that the point?
no, maybe the thing inside you that tells you if you don't do that, you're going to suffer, it makes you a better human.
So like the drive inside of us away from suffering is what drives us forward.
Yeah, and what if that thing disappears?
No, I don't think it will. Sorry.
Well, I think that we would have just a different goal then. Like right now we're trying to, take away poverty and war, and then once we do that, there will be new things to solve, like maybe coming together to explore space, or there's always progress. I think, we can cross that next progress bridge once we cross the first one. But yeah, it's right. I mean, another thing, a base of that argument, I think, is competition drives progress. Right? So if you don't have countries, for example, competing against one another, like if you didn't have the United States competing against Russia during World War II, then we wouldn't have had all that technological breakthrough. Which is a solid argument, you can make that point. But I think if you have these decentralized communities, for example, there would still be some competition between regional ones, and you can funnel that into things like sports and different, activities which they could partake in. So you can allow that drive for competition and allow that drive for progress, while at the same time having it be in a peaceful and productive way rather than a butchering and poverty creating way.
So, once again, okay, you might be right. No, you're right, actually. We're on the same thing about creating competition and stuff like that. But
you bring up good points.
I think that we are built for something. Listen, when we go to space, our bones get screwed up, no gravity, they become like cheese,
Or glass.
Yeah, or something like that. Happens something.
Glassy cheese.
Or robots.
Or robots. So what happens is that actually we change the environment and something changed for us. So okay, you put a guy where in that kind of environment, what the tiger in the cage, also another example. What do you think is going to happen? You know, it doesn't have to be right or wrong answer. I'm just putting it out there.
Maybe
Because,
it depends on how sexy the tiger is.
yeah.
I'm just joking. No, I mean,
I reject that competition is more creative than cooperation.
well, we
I
have
think
both.
science is a wonderful example where cooperation is vastly more productive and creative
It's a
than
mixture of
competition.
both.
There's also
Like
competition.
science-
Oh, you are so wrong. Science is competition like crazy. Those scientists have egos like elephants.
They do, but the scientific method is cooperative, even if individual scientists are competitive.
Is it though? Actually, I agree with you, but isn't the whole point of science to disprove other things?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's done in a cooperative way. It's really,
Yeah, with
it's,
peer review.
it's not meant to be,
It's a cooperative.
you suck because you're wrong,
It's
and
a
I'm going to crush
competitive
you.
thing in a cooperative way.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the structure that we can build. You know, stimulate our interesting and the benefits of cooperation in of competition in a competitive way. I can't speak English.
It has competition, but it's very gallant. That's the point, I guess.
Gallant?
Well,
Well, I mean,
maybe,
like
but
people
it's a
don't.
better
Einstein
way.
didn't went out when I don't know who was before, who was his biggest enemy. Or-
Niels Bohr, biggest enemy was Einstein.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he didn't went down and like stop kicking his, you know, sort of. They just disproved they had nice talks. Like now this, Susskind and Hawkins are also one. Susskind disproved his black hole theorem, and they have talks about each other, but they actually give compliments about, you know. So yeah, but there is still competition. I think that competition, it's not maybe that much obvious, but I think that they pretty much hate each other. I don't know if you've seen, there is a speech about, they have in New York, they have the Isaac Asimov every year, and the Grace Tyson it's doing out that every year, and they bring the biggest scientists to have a talk. And there was these two guys that worked in CERN, and there were the other guys, older guys, teachers from United States. And that wasn't that much. And one of them was a woman, and they almost started, you know, fighting over there, like insulting each other, like Italians drive too fast. You know, everything went up. I don't know, went up so crazy. So you see, because it's not because they don't have competition. It's because, I mean, there's the competition that drives them to do that.
We could look at Newton and Leibniz and say, well, they were competing. Actually, that's kind of after they ever did, but that was after they made their innovations. But let's just use it as an example. We now look back and say that, you know, Newton contributed this to the calculus and science, and Leibniz contributed this. And I think after a couple centuries, we actually see it as more cooperative than perhaps Newton and Leibniz at the time saw it, when they were fighting over who invented calculus. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I just think in the broad scope of science, these conflicts are not as important as the cooperative aspect. I mean, especially nowadays, when it's not just an individual in a lab. Now you need funders, and you need institutions, and you need lab assistants, and you need
Corporations.
And look at every science paper has 20 authors. So I think we're actually becoming more cooperative.
What's it called? Multidisciplinary, right?
But-
It's not. It's oftentimes not just a biologist, but it's also a.
But there is a competition for something else there, for resources. Who pays for it? Funding, yeah. They have to compete for that. They have to compete for the guys that work on there. Like they go lengths and lengths to find the best guys from India to come to work in, and they compete for that other guy. You say, oh, they don't go to Yale, or they don't give you this. So there is competition, but it's more gallant, more. I mean, it's more gentleman-like, like it's not. I would love to compete with the guy that can sit across me and kill me with fast, but not a guy that with a gun, like stuff like that. So I think you're right about that. But the competition stuff, they're competing about everything else, and if you just boil it to the bone, it's like a company to a company, corporation to a corporation.
Okay, I tend to believe that the competition is for a goal, and that is a common goal to gain, to know something more, to discover something. It's not like competition for the sake of competition for the sake of me proving that I'm smarter than you. I think there is a much bigger goal than achieving
Well, Peter Kropotkin, who died 100 years ago or something, but he wrote this book, Mutual Aid, where he reinterprets evolutionary theory in such a way that he argues that that's actually the most cooperative species that tended to do best in terms of evolution. And then he traces to early human societies, and he actually argues that the reason humans were so successful was because they were cooperative and not competitive. They weren't solitary hunters, they were group hunters.
Yeah.
And that argument I still find very compelling. And I see evidence of it just in where we are at our best. And it seems to me when we're cooperating on projects. NASA.
Circumstances have changed.
We're
You know,
cooperating
now we
because
are
of
not
Common
afraid
Goal.
of like being attacked by wild animals, you know. Now you can, you know, function individually without being afraid of your own, you know, personal, you know. You don't, I mean, you have life threats from like, okay, taxis and stuff. But,
Even at a fundamental level, like why do we couple? Why do we couple? I mean, we wake up in the morning and we sometimes just feel that need of someone next to us. I mean, I think this
well, that's
desire for
Plato
community and
explained that.
cooperation is really fundamental.
Can we play a little mental game? So,
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
you say, I also agree that we actually are more successful than elephants and monkeys because we actually stick together and fight against a common goal. At the beginning was, okay, to live through the winter, and after that was, I don't know, to live through, you know, the Romans attacking us and stuff like that. So, common goal, common goal, common goal. Utopia comes, what is the common goal?
Progress.
Well, maybe space travel. Oh, no. Okay, this brings me... I don't want to really distract, but I want to make a quick joke right here. We travel to another planet. How do you know that that planet has reached Utopia or not? I'll tell you. You know that planet has reached Utopia because all of their zebras are multicolored, right? They're not black and white anymore because the people got to Utopia and got bored, and they're like, hey, we might as well make rainbow zebras.
These black and white zebras.
Or whatever. I mean, if you find flying pigs, you've obviously found a utopia.
Well, I came for the rainbow zebras, so I'm glad we're finally talking about some real issues.
But I mean, I think the point is, what do people do? Well, that's a really good question, but I'm not sure if that's a problem, then that would be a problem that would like destroy Utopia at that point.
What do we do? Might as well cause some war. I think we're starting to touch on a really important thing, which is kind of more important than Utopia and more important than anything else. It's the reason for being, which is when do you feel most gratified? When do you feel most fulfilled and happy and confident? It's when you have a deep personal connection with people, right? Isn't true love kind of when you put somebody else in front of your own needs, and when you love someone so much that you would sacrifice your interests to help them, right? So maybe that's what this utopia should be built on, is finding ways to connect more deeply with one another, live in these kind of communities so that people want to clean the toilets. You know, because you know that it's people
Out of love.
that you love.
Educate people.
I want to clean your toilet because I love you.
But that's what led to the situation.
Very nice.
But humans have a natural desire to belong to a part of something bigger than them. And we are a tribal species, you know? So, but the problem is that now our tribe, the human family, has grown to a size that's impossible to personally know every other person. So we divide ourselves into false other tribes, like race and religion and nation.
Family.
Is family a false tribe? I don't know. I don't think family and tribe might be different in this context. But I see what you're saying.
Well, I think sometimes people couple for the wrong reasons or not, without as a replacement for that community that they feel. The community they desire for, they couple in lieu of that community.
Yeah.
That's
Can I mention something like last week? Actually, we talked about something like this similar, and he mentioned something about anarchy. And I want to ask him, like, okay, you mentioned, can you explain anarchy, because it's also something that is connected to what we talked about. Okay, what we want to do in Utopia, everything is gonna be. So, what is the official? How do you describe anarchy back then?
Well, there are different writers. One of them was Kropotkin that you mentioned, mutual aid. And it's hard to actually define what is anarchism, but it would go like this. Simply said, let's say like this. First, there is no top, so there is no hierarchy. The decision making is not made by top or by government, or I mean, that's the whole point. There can be a government, there can be a state, but there is no top, so no hierarchy. The first
there can be an infrastructure to
yes.
to make sure that people have their trash collected or whatever.
Yes.
I'm not sure we want to call it a state. Anarchists are pretty anti-statist.
We can still call it a state.
But a community or a society may not be antithetical to anarchism.
Association, communist party.
So it's also, anarchy is also kind of utopia, right?
Yeah. For the anarchists.
For the anarchists, it's probably not. Okay, Tolstoy tried to make his small communities who are anarchists.
Well, I just think that's the null state of humanity. If we go back to before 10,000 years ago, even the Neolithic was probably mostly anarchist. Certainly the Paleolithic was.
Let's say that's right.
So I think one time we're getting back to talking about utopian as something that's unachievable or impossible.
Yeah, that's the definition of utopia.
And I think that's not the most helpful. You know, it's like basing our space program on an idea that we're going to get faster than light travel. We should base our values on what is based on provable human experience. And I think utopia should be based on that. Because basing utopia on something that we all agree is impossible is like basing a space program on the idea that we'll have warp drive.
Yes. I think we were mostly talking about, today when we were talking about this utopia, I think we were mostly talking about anarchist utopia.
Yeah.
Utopia doesn't necessarily have to be anarchist. It can be have centralized government, centralized power, someone who gives orders. And actually, most of the utopias imagined by political philosophers are like that, starting from Plato. He divided, in his utopia, he divided people in three classes. The first class is the rulers. So it's to be a strict hierarchy, people who give orders. And the second class is the producers, who will produce for everybody, for themselves, for the rulers, and for the third class, which is the soldiers, who receive orders from the rulers to protect the country. So there is a strict hierarchy. It's not anarchy.
Can technology take out the human out of, and there will not be centralized? Okay, give me an example about this, how technology is actually running things without being in the center of the. There is no main computer. Like some of the banks, maybe he knows better, but some of the banks, what they do is for security reasons, there is no centralized place, so they don't get hacked. So there is always something different somewhere else controlling everything, you know? So it's not centralized. And that's a concept that actually might help in the future, where actually some place somewhere in the world cleans the air, some place delivers the food to everybody, some place, so it's, and human factor is taken out of it, so the technology gives everything to the, proportional levels of the people there, or reacts right on time. So I think that human factor taken out of the everyday things will pretty much create utopia, because it will take out the ego, the greed, the second thought of doing something, And as I mentioned before, I did some research about this, because we talked about this before, and we are going to have systems, not robots. We talk about robots, but the robots are very rude tool that we have. We're going to have systems around us doing stuff for us. It's going to be invisible. Technology is going to be invisible, not big hands, big eyes, electronic eyes, and T2000, that kind of. It's going to be something like that. The second thing, there is an example. Richard Feynman gave a speech about technology and computers. He's so good in everything. He was so good in explaining everything. So he tried to explain to dumb people what computers do. This is in the 80s. And he gave they asked him at the end of the speech, what do you think about computers doing the Terminator scenario or something like that, like coming and killing us. He said, no, computers are going to take out of the equation. And he gives an example of a naval game that used to be played in California. It was like a Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing, but it was played by many people, competition, very big. So one guy that worked for Hewlett Packard, he used to, at night he stayed at the computers. You know, back then the computers were furniture or something like this. They were so big, you know, and they stayed in the offices over there and worked with the computers. So he made the best calculations how to beat the other guy. So you build a ship and how do you attack them, strategy and stuff like that. That was the naval game. This guy won the first year. His computer find a way that if you build the biggest armor, you're gonna kill everything and you're gonna survive. The second year, they changed the rules, so the computer devised a way to build the best machine, small machine, thousands of small machines, and at the end, those machines survived. And at the third year, they didn't let him play because he was using the computer. So they called him and gave a speech. This guy gave a speech and explained how he played this game and how he used this computer to create so good intelligence. And he says, okay, I create heuristics, you know, like from the word eureka, you know, stuff like that. So the computer awards itself if he invents something, not does something else what you tell him.
Yeah.
So he created a computer that awards himself. But it had two very important bugs that lead to this success. The first bug was something like this. There was an order. If this guy comes, the creator of this software, if this guy comes and says something, you don't listen to him. So it's taking out the human factor. And the second thing was something very suspicious and after that unseen. The computer created a word for himself. So there was always something that was like, for example, if there is a good idea in this software, it gets like points every time. But there was a word that just gave points all the time. So the computer makes himself a word by himself, you know, give him his own pleasure. And this actually proves the thing I want to say, that I think technology in Utopia is going to take the human factor out of everything, not going to kill around.
Okay. Well, I want to respond to that, and then I'll conclude, and I'll shut up for the rest of the day after this. I'm very horrified by actually what you were saying there. The idea of a central system delivering us food, or cleaning the air, or doing all these things that humans want to, a centralized system, is no better, in my view, than a technocracy or a bureaucracy, or even just having, you know, like a Stalinist dictatorship. I don't see that as any better. The reason why is because I lose control over my life, and I lose control over my community's life, and I surrendered it to someone else, and that is antithetical to me, to Utopia. Now, but I still think technology has a role, though, so I want to posit another technology. Let's take the 3D printer, or the nano factory, or some equivalent, in which everyone can have one of those in their backyard or their home. Then I can create from that wood beams that I use to build my home. I can use that to create raw clay that I can use to make pottery. I can engage myself in any kind of creative activities I want with that, but I'm not dependent on a central bureaucracy or a central computer to do that.
We are talking
Yet
about
we're both technological solutions. I just think yours is fundamentally less democratic and not human scale, and actually quite a threat to humanity.
I think that we are talking about two different things here.
I am
About
talking
tools. We are talking about tools. I'm not talking about tools. The 3D machine is a tool. And by the way, if you say that
You're talking about systems. That's what I'm
yeah, well,
rejecting.
don't get into the MRT now, because that's the way MRT works. It controls the way. You give the life
Yeah,
to the
I know.
MRT machine over there. I don't know where it's in Taipei. You give your life there. So why do you don't say okay, I don't want the central thing delivering me food, but on the other side you get into the MRT and take a ride. And are you scared?
I'm not scared because I have experience.
Because I'm terrified.
But I am aware that I'm surrendering some of my autonomy when I do that.
But MRT is controlled by people. Like they can stop you anytime you like,
Yeah.
It's not a system that you cannot control.
Well,
I'm not sure
that's
the MRT is a model for Utopia. Anyways, I'm done.
It's not just the MRT, it's the airplanes, landing, stuff like that. That's all every day as we speak now, that evolves into a better and better state. So we are deliberately, willingly or not, maybe you are less than me, but we are delivering our fate into the hands of those kind of centralized systems, not tools. Brains.
I think we could have a system, but it should be like an operating system. Like you have business or like Windows, it works everything behind, but like you still clicking what you want to. It's not like you get food every day at 5 p.m. You click, I want food.
But this fine one.
It's a bit maybe off the point, but there is a research that pilots these days relying too much on autopilots and technology are actually, that's considered to be the cause of loads of recent plane crashes. So actually when the technology takes over, or like when we kind of like rely too much on technology, it might be even,
But the point with the final one example I gave is that if we want to use technology, I mean, that's the only way out so far. I don't see anything else. But technology will say, okay, listen, if you want to do it, do it. If you want me to do it, let me do it. That's the way it works. I'm talking about not tools. So we might say, okay, turn off the autopilot, people clicking the MRT thing and stuff like that. But technology won't be perfect and won't do what we want to do if we intervene. And that's why I think that if we talk about technology bringing us utopia, or I don't see any other way, as I said.
But technology doesn't understand exceptions, and life is full of exceptions.
Yes, there is a good example about that with the Google car. They make a Google car. So what Google car happened is actually goes to Isaac Asimov thing. With Google car was driving on the road. There is a dog. There is a person on the road. Sorry, and the car decides to kill the guy in the. This is a simulation, by the way. It's not a real thing. Decides to kill the guy in the car, not to kill the guy on the street. And they went back reasoning why, and he says, okay, this guy bought a car that is run by me. That guy on the street didn't choose to buy somebody else to buy a car and drive on the street, stuff like that. So their robots, technology creates their own ethics.
I promise you shut up.
Huh?
I promise you shut up.
But that's simulation that would kill both of them.
No, okay, there is like, okay, either you fly out of the road or you go over this guy.
Oh, okay.
So,
What about parachutes?
I don't know how this anarchist system, robotic system work. I cannot understand that.
Okay, so
but
what exactly?
I'm not really convinced about the human anarchy. I mean, I'm not really convinced that a human anarchy can really exist.
What do you mean with, what do you mean by the anarchy system? I've been looking into
Without
it. There
central
are
power.
lots of different ideas.
Without central power.
Okay, so then you have a smaller
It's just
power.
without a
smaller
decision
community.
that comes from the top goes down.
So like a commune sort of thing.
Like
People
the army.
are-
The army is
yeah.
hierarchy. Can you imagine an anarchist army?
No, that's...
Maybe
Well, the Spanish Civil War.
no won't last very long. Yeah.
The Spanish Civil War had this. The anarchists in the Spanish Civil War did have, they elected their officers.
Anarchist army, but they have to have
Well, they lost.
hierarchy.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Okay, if you have like a small community of people and they have robots that are running their food system, and they have and they have like green technologies to bring in the energy to run these systems
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Maybe it's like the
All they
Borgs,
need is the
like the
land.
Borgs from Star Trek. Are they anarchists? Do they have?
No, they have a central.
Oh, they have a set.
They have a central. But also there, one of you kill the central, somebody else becomes something else. Same like the bank thing, it just changes all the time. So it's not the bank in Chicago that is the place of, then it goes to New York and then it goes to Washington, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same place, just for security.
We're almost out of time. I'm going to let this run out just so we have time to pack up because they're basically closed. But I think there are, obviously a few things. Let's go to the park and continue to discuss this because there's still what can we do as individuals.
Bio si se kom košulje sa flekom, govori mi lošu vest. Meni ponos ne da ti pravim ljubomorne scene. Hoću da upoznaš život posle prevarene žene. Crveni ruž na tome vratu nije vredan bola. Tera me tera okolo da šetam polugola. Hej, ako ti nesanica svrati, psihijatru se obrati. Večeras vidjet ćeš sve tuđu, bar osi najluđu. Jutros neobičan alarm, našoj vezi dođe kraj. Nema gde nema ženskog parfema, čudan ti u oko sjaj. Meni ponos ne da ti pravim ljubomorne scene. Hoću da upoznaš život posle pre